My name is Dorothy Hargrove. I am 69 years old, a widow, and until last Tuesday morning, I believed that the greatest thing I had ever built in my life was my family. I was wrong. The greatest thing I ever built was myself. I just forgot that for a while. The morning it all began was the kind of Tennessee morning that makes you believe the world is fundamentally good. October light came through the kitchen windows the way it only does in autumn, slanted and golden, the kind that makes even ordinary things look like they belong in a painting. The hydrangeas Harold and I planted along the back fence in 1987 had gone rust and copper with the season, and from where I sat on the porch with my coffee, they looked like they were quietly on fire. I had been up since 5:30, the way I always am. A 69-year-old body doesn't negotiate with alarm clocks. I'd already watered the garden, read the first 40 pages of a novel Barbara had lent me, and baked a full pan of peach cobbler. Nathan's favorite since he was 7 years old, back when he used to stand on a step stool and try to steal spoonfuls of the filling before it went into the crust. I set the cobbler on the counter to cool and told myself he'd be here by Sunday. Maybe Brittany would bring the kids early this time. Maybe Owen would finally agree to let me teach him how to play rummy, the way his grandfather had taught me the summer we got engaged. Maybe Lily would want to help me replant the window boxes before the first frost came. I was building the whole weekend in my mind, the way mothers do, constructing a small, careful happiness out of ordinary things, when my phone buzzed on the porch railing. The screen said Nathan. I smiled and picked it up before the second ring. "Good morning, sweetheart." "Mom." His voice was flat. Not unkind exactly, but flat the way a form letter is flat. Perfectly correct and completely empty. "I'm just calling to give you an update." I set my coffee down. An update. Not "hi, Mom," or "how are you," or even the distracted, half-present hello I'd grown accustomed to over the past few years. An update, like I was a client being briefed. "Of course," I said, keeping my voice warm. "What's going on, honey? Are the kids—" "Everyone's fine. Nobody's sick." I could hear noise behind him, the hollow echo of a large empty space, voices, the squeak of something being dragged across a hard floor. "I just wanted to let you know, we moved. We're in Scottsdale now. Arizona. We've been here about 10 days. The porch seemed to tilt. I gripped the armrest of my chair with my free hand. I am not a woman who falls apart easily. Harold used to say I had the emotional architecture of a well-built bridge. But in that moment, the ground beneath me felt genuinely uncertain. I stopped, started again. "Nathan, you moved to Arizona. Brittany got promoted, regional director position based out of Phoenix. It was a huge opportunity, Mom. And it happened fast. We had to find a place, get the kids enrolled, deal with the movers. It all kind of snowballed." 10 days. They had been living in another state for 10 days. I thought about the cobbler cooling on my counter. I thought about the Sunday I had been building in my head for the past week. I thought about how I had texted Nathan last Thursday, asking if he wanted me to make his favorite meal, and he had written back, "Sounds great. Talk soon," while he was already living in Arizona. "And the children?" I asked carefully. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "Owen and Lily, they just changed schools without saying goodbye to their grandmother?" I heard Nathan exhale. The particular exhale of a man who had been expecting this conversation and had decided in advance to find it tiresome. "Mom, they're kids. They adjusted fine. Lily loves her new teacher. Owen's already made friends on the soccer team." A brief pause. "You can FaceTime them whenever you want." In the background, I heard Brittany's voice, clear and carrying, the way voices do when someone isn't bothering to lower them. "Nathan, don't let this turn into a whole thing. We talked about this." There was the muffled, slightly shuffling sound of a phone being partially covered. Then Nathan again, his voice just slightly tighter. "Mom, I gotta go. The last of the boxes are being sorted. The place has a pool. The kids love it. I'll call you on video this week, okay? We'll catch up properly then." "Of course," I said. "Good luck with the unpacking." I hung up before he did. I sat on that porch for a long time after. The hydrangeas burned copper and rust in the morning light. The coffee went cold beside me. Inside, the peach cobbler sat on the counter cooling to room temperature, and I found I couldn't look at it. 10 days. That was what kept circling through my mind, slowly, the way a word loses its meaning when you say it too many times. 10 days. They had lived a whole new life for 10 days. Found an apartment, enrolled my grandchildren in new schools, arranged the furniture in rooms I would never see, and Nathan had found the time to answer my Thursday text with "Sounds great. Talk soon," but not to tell me his family no longer existed in the same state as mine. Nobody forgets to tell their mother. I knew that with the clean certainty of a woman who has lived 69 years and learned to read the difference between accident and decision. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen. They had looked at their list of things to do and quietly placed me somewhere below, arranging cable service and ordering new bath towels. I stood up, went inside, put the cobbler in the refrigerator because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Not yet. Then I went to Harold's study. Everything in that room was exactly as he had left it 4 years ago. I know some people find that strange. A widow preserving a dead man's office like a museum. But for me, Harold's study was never about grief. It was about thinking. Harold had done his best thinking in that room, surrounded by his law books and the smell of the old leather chair and the particular quality of silence that seemed to gather there. When I needed to think clearly, I went where the clear thinking lived. I sat in his chair, looked at his shelves, and I let myself remember. The night Nathan and Brittany's rent check bounced and they called me at 11:30 on a Thursday, too embarrassed to tell Harold, asking if I could cover it just this month. I sold the first block of stock I'd ever bought with my own money, a small investment I'd made in 1998, back when Harold and I were first learning to manage the company finances together. I covered 2 months of their rent, not one, and I never told Harold. I called it a gift to myself, the gift of not watching my son be humiliated. The year Brittany lost her position at the design firm, and Nathan's contracting business was slow, and I paid their health insurance premiums for 14 months without being asked. Owen was 3 years old and had asthma. I would have paid for 100 years. The Thanksgiving 3 years ago when Brittany sat at my table eating the sweet potato casserole I'd made from scratch, and said as casually as she might comment on the weather, "Dorothy, no offense, but you can be a little clingy. Nathan needs space to be a husband first, not a son." Nathan had said nothing. I had stood up to clear the plates. I opened the bottom drawer of Harold's desk, the one where I kept the personal financial ledger I'd maintained separately from Gerald Whitfield's official records. I flipped to the running total I updated every January. 7 years of support. Nathan's tuition loans paid off. Brittany's car paid off. The children's school, the premium not quite private institution they'd insisted on. The medical bills when Owen's asthma flared badly the winter of 2021. The kitchen renovation they said they needed. The $28,000 that had arrived over 6 separate loans, none of which had ever been repaid or acknowledged as a debt. Total, $216,000. $216,000, given freely, given because I loved them, given because I was their mother and grandmother, and I genuinely believed, that I was building something. A foundation, a net beneath them so they could reach higher without fear. They had taken the net and moved to Arizona. I closed the ledger. I sat with the number for a moment, not with anger. The anger would come later, and it would come in useful, but with the strange, cold clarity of a woman who has finally understood something she had been resisting for years. I reached for my phone and called Gerald Whitfield. Gerald had taken over Harold's clients when Harold passed, and in doing so had become, without either of us ever making it official, the most trusted person in my life outside of Barbara next door. He answered on the second ring. "Dot, what's wrong?" "Why does something have to be wrong?" "Because you never call before 9 in the morning unless something's wrong and it's 7:42. I almost smiled. "I need to come in today. This morning if you have time. I'll move the 8:30. A brief pause. "Do you want to tell me what this is about?" I looked around Harold's study. The law books, the leather chair, the framed photograph on the desk of the 3 of us the summer Nathan graduated college, Harold's arm around my shoulder, Nathan squinting into the sun. "Nathan moved his family to Arizona 10 days ago," I said. "He called me this morning to let me know." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "I see. Gerald, I need you to pull every piece of paperwork that has Nathan's name attached to anything of mine, every authorization, every power of attorney, every account where he has any level of access. Everything. Can you have that ready when I come in?" Another pause, longer this time. "Dot, is there something specific I should be looking for?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I have a feeling I should know before they do whatever they're planning to do next." I dressed carefully that morning, not the gardening clothes I'd planned for the day, and not the comfortable weekend ease of slacks and a light cardigan. I put on the navy blue wool suit I wore when I used to sit beside Harold in meetings, the one he called my business Dorothy suit, because I understood, with some instinct I couldn't have explained, that today was a day that required me to know exactly who I was. I called a cab. While I waited on the front steps, Barbara appeared at the fence, coffee in hand, reading glasses pushed up into her silver hair. "You look serious," she said. "Where are you off to all dressed up on a Saturday morning?" "Running an errand," I said. Barbara studied me with the unsentimental affection of a woman who has been your neighbor for 31 years, and therefore knows every version of your face. "Dorothy Hargrove, what happened?" "Nothing I can't handle," I said. And then, because Barbara deserved more than evasion, "Nathan called this morning. They moved to Arizona 10 days ago." Barbara's face went through several things in quick succession. Then she said with the quiet force of genuine outrage on my behalf, "That boy." "That boy," I agreed. The cab pulled up. "I'll tell you everything tonight. Put a bottle of wine in the refrigerator." Gerald's office was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled of old wood and good coffee, the kind of building that makes you feel, just by walking into it, that things can be managed. He stood when I came in, the way he always did. Harold had raised him right. He always joked, though Gerald had trained under Harold for 8 years, and the respect was genuine on both sides. "Sit down, Dot." He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "I've pulled what I can this morning. There are a few things you need to know." I sat. "Tell me." Gerald opened a folder, smoothed it flat on the desk, and looked at me over the rims of his glasses with the expression I had learned to recognize as his, "This is going to require your full attention" expression. "When Harold restructured the company before he passed," Gerald began, "he made a decision that at the time we agreed not to discuss with Nathan until the estate was fully settled." I nodded. I knew this part. Harold transferred 60% of Hargrove family holdings, the apartment building, the investment portfolio, and the discretionary trust, into your name alone. Full control. Nathan's understanding has always been that the estate was divided, that he had some stake in the family assets. He doesn't, not while you're living. Every payment you've made to him over the years has been at your discretion, from your assets, not from any obligation. "Nathan doesn't know this," I said. It was not a question. "Nathan believes his father left things more or less equally. Harold wanted it that way. He wanted the transition to be quiet, without confrontation." Gerald paused. "I think Harold knew that if Nathan understood the full picture, he might behave differently. Push back. Make it complicated." I thought about the $216,000. I thought about "sounds great, talk soon," sent from an apartment in Arizona while I was planning a Sunday visit. "Harold was protecting me," I said softly. "He was protecting what he'd built," Gerald said. "He trusted you to know when to use it." I sat with that for a moment. Harold speaking to me through paperwork and legal structures, the way lawyers do, quietly, precisely, with complete faith in the recipient. "I trusted you to know when to use it." "All right," I said. I opened my handbag and set the financial ledger on his desk. "Here's where we start. 3 things today. Stop the automatic monthly transfer to Nathan's account. Cancel the supplementary cards, Nathan's and Brittany's, both." I folded my hands. "And pull every document where my name appears as any kind of guarantor or authorized party in anything connected to Nathan in the last 3 years. Everything." Gerald was already writing. He stopped after the 3rd item and looked up. "Dot," he said carefully, "you should know. I started the preliminary review before you arrived. There may be something in that 3rd category that you're not going to like." The room was very quiet. Outside, a city bus moved down the street below the window, and a pigeon landed on the sill and looked in at us briefly before flying away. "Tell me," I said. Gerald took off his glasses and cleaned them, his nervous habit, the one he'd had since he was Harold's junior associate, and said, "I found a lease, a condominium rental in Scottsdale, Arizona, $4,200 a month, 24-month term." He set his glasses back on. "Your name is listed as the financial guarantor. The authorization used was the power of attorney you signed in 2019, the one we drew up specifically for vehicle title registration. The number $4,200 sat in the air between us." "The vehicle registration power of attorney," I repeated. The language was broad enough that a motivated person, or a leasing company that didn't look too carefully, could argue it covered other financial obligations. Gerald's voice was measured, professional, but I could see the controlled anger underneath it, the way Harold's used to look when someone had done something genuinely wrong and Harold was deciding how to respond. They used your name and your assets to guarantee a luxury apartment rental without your knowledge or consent. I looked at Harold's photograph on Gerald's bookshelf. Gerald had kept one too, the firm's founding partner, framed in dark wood. Harold at 55, sharp-eyed and smiling. I trusted you to know when to use it. Gerald, I said. My voice was very calm. How long would it take to file a petition to revoke that guarantee on the grounds of unauthorized use? I can have it filed by end of business today. Do that. I stood, smoothed my skirt, picked up my handbag. And Gerald, check the trust accounts, all of them. I want to know if anyone has made any inquiries, any contact, any requests for information about withdrawal terms or beneficiary access. Gerald's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for me to see that this was not an unexpected request. I'll have everything ready for your review by Monday morning, he said. I nodded. At the door, I paused and turned back. Harold always said you were the most thorough man he'd ever trained, I said. Gerald looked at me steadily. Harold trained me to protect what mattered. Then protect it, I said. Everything you find. I want it documented. We're going to need it. That evening I sat on the back porch as the Tennessee dusk came down, slow and purple, over the garden Harold and I had spent 30 years building together. My phone had rung 11 times. I had not answered once. A text from Nathan read, Mom, something's wrong with the card. Can you call the bank? Kind of embarrassing. We're at the grocery store. A voicemail from Brittany, which I did not play, sat waiting in the queue with the small red badge of a thing that needed attending to. I would attend to it. Just not tonight. Tonight I sat with my coffee and watched the last light leave Harold's hydrangeas, and I thought about a boy who used to stand on a step stool and try to steal peach cobbler filling before it was ready, and how somewhere between that boy and the man who said sounds great, talk soon from an apartment in Arizona, something had gone quietly, terribly wrong. And I thought it is not too late, not for any of us. But the road back to something real and honest was going to require something I had spent years avoiding, because I loved them. The full, unsparing truth. I went inside, locked the door, turned off the porch light. Tomorrow, the work would begin. They thought cutting themselves free of me would leave them standing on solid ground. What they didn't know was that I was the ground. Monday morning arrived with the indifferent brightness of a day that has no idea it is about to matter. I was dressed by 6:15, the navy suit again. I had decided it was my working uniform until this was finished. I made coffee, drank it standing at the kitchen counter instead of on the porch, because sitting on the porch was for peaceful mornings, and this was not going to be a peaceful morning. By 7 o'clock, I had called Mr. Preston at the bank. Preston had managed our family accounts for 19 years. He had attended Harold's funeral. He was the kind of banker who still remembered that banking, at its foundation, is a relationship between people who trust each other, a quality that had become rare enough to be remarkable. Dorothy, he said with the particular warmth of a man genuinely glad to hear from someone. What can I do for you this morning? I need 2 things, Preston, and I need them completed before the business day opens. I kept my voice brisk and pleasant, the tone Harold called my board meeting voice, efficient without being cold. First, I need the automatic monthly transfer to Nathan Hargrove's personal account stopped permanently, effective today. Second, I need all supplementary cards linked to any of my accounts, his name, Brittany's name, deactivated immediately. A brief pause. When Preston spoke again, his voice had the careful neutrality of a professional man absorbing information he has decided not to comment on. I can have both done within the hour, Dorothy. Thank you, Preston. One more thing. I set down my coffee cup. I want a fraud alert placed on all accounts, and if any unusual access attempts occur, any inquiries, login attempts from unrecognized devices, anything at all, I want a call directly to my cell phone within the hour. Not a letter, a call. Understood completely. Another pause, smaller this time. Dorothy, is everything all right? I looked out the kitchen window at the October garden, the copper hydrangeas, the window boxes I had promised myself I would replant before the frost. Everything is exactly as it should be, Preston, I said. Thank you. By 9 o'clock, I had also called the insurance company, canceled the family health plan that had covered Nathan, Brittany, and the children under my policyholder account, the one I had been quietly maintaining since Owen's asthma diagnosis in 2019, and made a note to have Gerald set up a separate children's-only policy for Owen and Lily, because whatever happened between their parents and me, those two children would not lose their coverage. I was sitting at Harold's desk reviewing the company ledger when my cell phone rang. Nathan, for the 10th time since Sunday evening. I looked at the screen for 3 full rings. Then I picked up. "Good morning, Nathan." "Mom." His voice was tight, compressed, the voice of a man holding something large and unwieldy and trying to sound like he isn't. "Something is wrong with our accounts. All the cards are declined. The bank app says access is restricted. I've been calling you since yesterday." "I know," I said pleasantly. "How's the weather in Scottsdale?" A silence, then, "Mom, what did you do?" "I made some financial adjustments," I said. "I've been meaning to reorganize things for a while. This seemed like a good time." "A good time." His voice cracked slightly on the second word. "Mom, we have 2 kids. We have groceries to buy. The school requires a payment next week for Owen's field trip." "Nathan." I said his name the way I used to when he was 14, and had tried to explain away a broken curfew with a story that made no internal sense. Quietly, with absolute clarity. "I need you to listen to me carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." He went quiet. "That apartment in Scottsdale," he said. "The one with the pool. The $4,200 a month, 24-month lease." I let those numbers sit in the air for a moment. "Tell me about the guarantor." The silence that followed was the specific silence of a person who has been caught, who has known they would eventually be caught, and who had hoped it would take longer. "Mom, tell me about the guarantor, Nathan." "We needed someone with assets on record. The leasing company required it. We were going to pay the rent on time. With the money I sent every month." He didn't answer. "You signed my name as financial guarantor on a luxury apartment lease using a power of attorney document that was created for the specific and limited purpose of registering a vehicle title." I kept my voice even. "Do you understand what that is, legally?" "We didn't mean for it to be. What it is, legally," I continued as though he hadn't spoken, "is fraudulent misuse of a limited legal authorization. Gerald Whitfield filed the petition to revoke that guarantee this morning. The leasing company will receive formal notice today. They'll require a new guarantor within 48 hours, or 3 months' rent paid up front." I picked up my pen, made a small note on the pad beside the ledger. "You should begin making some calls." "Mom." His voice had dropped to something raw, something I hadn't heard from him in years. Not the polished, slightly impatient tone he'd been using with me for the past 3 or 4 years, but something underneath it, younger and frightened. "Mom, please, we have the kids here. We're just getting settled. If the lease falls apart now—" "Then you'll need to find a solution," I said. "The way adults do." I hung up. I sat for a moment in Harold's chair after, my hand still resting on the phone. There is something people don't tell you about enforcing a boundary you should have enforced years ago. It doesn't feel good, not exactly. It feels necessary, the way surgery is necessary. The right action, the correct action, but not a painless one. Somewhere in a sunny apartment in Scottsdale, my son was frightened. Part of me, the part that had sat up 3 nights in a row when he had the flu at age 9, the part that had saved his first drawing from kindergarten in a box I still kept on the closet shelf, that part felt his fear and ached with it. But I thought of the ledger, $216,000. And sounds great. Talk soon. I stood up and went to make a fresh pot of coffee. It was nearly noon when Gerald called. I was in the garden deadheading the last of the autumn roses when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I pulled off one glove and answered. Dot. Gerald's voice had the particular quality it got when he was about to deliver news he found genuinely troubling. Measured, precise, without drama, but underneath the precision, something tight. "I've completed the full review you asked for. There's something beyond the lease that you need to know about." I straightened up. "Tell me." "I contacted the trust management company this morning, Whitmore & Associates, who administers Harold's discretionary trust. I asked them to pull all external communications received in the past 6 months." A brief pause. "In August, they received an email inquiry from what appeared to be your address, asking about early withdrawal terms, beneficiary substitution procedures, and the process for adding a co-administrator to the trust. The roses were very still in the windless October air. "That wasn't my email," I said. "No," Gerald said. "It was an address created to look like yours. One letter transposed in the domain. .hargrove instead of .hargrove. Whitmore's team responded with preliminary documentation about the trust structure. They sent it in good faith, believing they were communicating with you." I pulled off the other gardening glove. "The IP address on the inquiry," I said. "Where was it from?" "Scottsdale, Arizona," Gerald said. I want to be careful here, because what I'm describing is an action that, if prosecuted, carries—" "I know what it carries," I said. I had been married to a lawyer for 41 years. "Gerald, add it to the file, document everything. Whitmore's response, the fraudulent email address, the IP records, everything." "Already done." Another pause. "Are you sure you want to—" "Yes," I said before he could finish the question. "Yes, I'm sure. How are we positioned on the vehicle?" The SUV, a 4-year-old Hargrove Family Holdings Company vehicle, registered under the LLC, driven by Nathan under a restricted use agreement that specified Tennessee residency, had traveled to Arizona without notice, without authorization, and in direct violation of the insurance terms of the company policy. The repossession order can be executed by a licensed recovery service as early as Friday morning, Gerald said. We'd need a court officer to serve the supporting paperwork simultaneously. Given the lease situation, the timing would create a complete picture, I said. Yes, Gerald said quietly. A complete picture. I looked at the garden, Harold's hydrangeas, the window boxes that still needed replanting. Do it Friday, I said. First thing in the morning. Brittany called that evening at 9:15. I was in Harold's armchair with a cup of chamomile tea and my book, and the phone buzzed on the side table like something impatient and slightly hostile, which of course it was. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. Hello, Brittany. No greeting in return. Dorothy. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had decided that the most effective approach was offense delivered at full volume, slightly breathless, charged with the energy of someone who has been working herself up to a confrontation for several hours. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to understand that what you're doing is hurting your grandchildren. Owen asked me tonight why his lunch card wasn't working at school. He's 9 years old, Dorothy. 9. I kept my voice level, my tea warm in my hands. Hello, Brittany. How are you? Don't do that. Her voice sharpened. Don't do the passive-aggressive sweet old lady thing. I know exactly what you're doing. You're jealous because we built something without you. You can't stand that Nathan has a life that doesn't revolve around you, so you're punishing us. Brittany, I said, and something in my tone, not loudness, not heat, but a quality of absolute certainty, stopped her mid-sentence. You used my name. You signed a legal document with my name as financial guarantor without my knowledge or consent. I need you to understand clearly that I am aware of this, that my attorney has filed the appropriate paperwork, and that the leasing company will be in contact with you within 24 hours. Silence. Beyond that, I continued in the same steady tone, I'm aware of the inquiry made to Harold's Trust Management Company in August, from an email address designed to look like mine, asking about withdrawal procedures and co-administrator access. I paused. That one is more serious, Brittany. That one has a name. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The performance was gone. What was underneath it was colder, and in some ways more honest. You can't prove any of that. I have the email address, the response documents Whitmore sent, and the IP records from Scottsdale, I said pleasantly. Gerald has the complete file. I also have 7 years of financial records showing every dollar I transferred, which establishes a pattern of dependency that will be very useful context for everything else. Another silence. Longer. What do you want? Brittany said at last. Her voice was flat now, stripped of its performance. This was, I realized, the first genuine question she had ever asked me. Right now, nothing from you tonight, I said. Get some sleep, Brittany. You're going to have a busy few days. I paused. And tell Nathan not to do anything foolish with the accounts. Gerald is watching. I ended the call. Blocked her number for 48 hours. Sat quietly with my chamomile tea. Outside, the October night was still and cold and full of stars. Friday came the way consequential days often do, too bright, too ordinary on the surface, carrying everything underneath. I was in the garden at 8:15 when Gerald called. "It's done, Dot." I set down my trowel. "Tell me." Gerald's voice was calm and precise, but I had known him long enough to hear the thing underneath the precision. Not satisfaction exactly, but the particular gravity of a man who has watched justice move and is neither glad nor sorry, only certain it was correct. "They were at the school," he said. Nathan was dropping Owen and Lily off at the front gate. The recovery vehicle and the court officer arrived simultaneously. The officer presented the documentation, the vehicle belonging to Hargrove Family Holdings, LLC, the restricted use agreement, the violation of interstate transport terms. I closed my eyes briefly. Owen and Lily at the school gate. "The children," I said. "Were they?" "They were asked to step to the sidewalk first. They were not in the vehicle when it was secured." Gerald's voice gentled slightly. "They were standing with Nathan when Brittany arrived. The officer reports that Nathan read the paperwork without speaking. Brittany became vocal, threatened to call the police, alleged theft. The officer explained the legal standing clearly and without escalation." I exhaled slowly. "Nathan had to remove the children's car seats and their backpacks from the vehicle before it was towed," Gerald said. "He did it himself on the sidewalk in front of the school entrance." I thought of my son, a man who used to care deeply about appearances, who drove a company SUV and talked about investment portfolios at dinner parties, taking his children's car seats out of a repossessed vehicle on a sidewalk in front of strangers. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But I remembered the ledger. I remembered the power of attorney. I remembered the email address with one letter transposed, the inquiry about Harold's trust, the things we enable by never letting anyone feel the consequence of what they've done. "And the lease notice?" I asked. "Delivered simultaneously to the Scottsdale property address. They have 48 hours to produce a new qualified guarantor or pay 3 months up front, $12,600. Otherwise, the eviction process begins Monday." "All right, Gerald." I picked up my trowel. "Thank you. Dot." He hesitated, which Gerald rarely did. "Brace yourself for this weekend. When people have nowhere left to turn, they turn toward the last door they haven't tried. They'll come." "I know," I said. "I'm ready." That afternoon, Barbara appeared at the garden fence while I was replanting the window boxes, the task I had been putting off for 2 weeks, the one I had told myself I would finish before the frost. She had 2 cups of coffee. She handed one over the fence without a word, and for a few minutes we just stood there, Barbara on her side and me on mine, the way women who have been neighbors for 30 years can simply be quiet together without it meaning anything is wrong. "Gerald said they'll probably come this weekend," I said finally. Barbara nodded slowly, looking at the garden. "What are you going to do?" I pressed fresh soil around the base of a small chrysanthemum, its yellow petals bright and unaware of the October cold that was coming for them. "What Harold would have done," I said. "What I should have done a long time ago." Barbara was quiet for a moment. "And the kids? Owen and Lily?" "The kids will always have a place here." I straightened up, brushed the soil from my hands. That was never in question. Barbara looked at me with the expression she had, the one that was not pity and not admiration, but something in between, something more honest than either. "Harold would be proud of you, Dorothy," she said. I looked at the hydrangeas, gone copper and rust in the October light. "Harold would say I told you so," I said, "and then he'd make me a gin and tonic." Barbara laughed, a real laugh, the kind that means everything is terrible and survivable at the same time. I took my coffee and went back to planting. They came on Sunday. I had known they would. Gerald had told me, and more than Gerald, I had known it in the way you know things when you have watched someone long enough to understand how they move when they run out of options. I was in Harold's study when the security camera on the front gate picked them up at 11:47, a rental car, low and scratched, the kind that costs $80 a day and smells of other people's decisions. Nathan got out first. He had lost weight in a week. His shirt was wrinkled and his jaw was unshaven, and he moved with the slightly stunned quality of a man who has not been sleeping. Brittany got out of the passenger side. No makeup, hair pulled back hastily. She looked, for the first time since I had known her, like someone who had stopped performing and was simply standing in the remains of what the performance had cost her. And then the back doors opened, and Owen and Lily climbed out, dragging their backpacks, and the sight of them, travel-crumpled, tired-eyed, bewildered, went through my chest like a key turning in a lock. I watched on the screen as Nathan approached the side gate and inserted his key. I had changed all the locks on Thursday. He tried twice. Then Brittany snatched the key from his hand and tried herself, switching between keys with escalating frustration, and then her voice came through the camera's audio feed, raw and unfiltered. "She changed the locks. Nathan, she changed all the locks." I set down the camera remote, smoothed my jacket, walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out onto the porch. I did not go down the steps. I stood at the top, looked down at them through the wrought iron gate, and felt the full weight of the moment. Not with triumph, not with satisfaction, but with the clear, sad, necessary feeling of a woman who has finally stopped pretending that love alone is enough to keep a family honest. "Mom," Nathan's voice broke slightly on the word. "Please open the gate. The kids haven't eaten since early this morning. We drove all night." I looked at Owen and Lily. Owen was watching me with Harold's eyes, steady, waiting, trying to understand what was happening. Lily had her lower lip tucked between her teeth, the way she did when she was trying not to cry. My grandchildren. Harold's grandchildren. I reached into my pocket and took out the remote. "Owen," I said, my voice warm and completely steady. "Lily, come inside, babies. Grandma has peach cobbler and cold apple juice, and Barbara made her snickerdoodles this morning." I pressed the button. The gate opened, just wide enough. Brittany moved immediately, stepping in front of Lily, her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Nobody goes in unless we all go in. We're a family. Brittany." My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "Take your hand off my granddaughter. Do not use a 7-year-old child as a negotiating position." Something in my tone, or perhaps the simple unadorned truth of the sentence, made Brittany's hand fall. Owen and Lily ran to me. I held them both at once, breathing in the smell of road travel and unwashed hair, and the particular warmth of children who have been frightened and are now safe. And I let myself have that moment fully, completely, before I looked up. "Now," I said over the tops of their heads, looking at the 2 adults standing outside my gate. "We talk." I sent Owen and Lily inside to Barbara, who had appeared in the hallway with the intuitive timing of a woman who had been listening for her cue. Then I came back to the porch, walked down the steps, and stood at the gate. Nathan spoke first. "You planned all of this," he said. Not as an accusation. He was past accusations. It was almost wondering, almost respectful. "The cards, the car, the lease, you had all of it ready." "I had 48 hours to prepare," I said. "You had 7 years." He absorbed that. I reached into the leather portfolio I had carried out with me and withdrew a stapled document. 4 pages, Gerald's clear legal formatting, the language precise and fair and without cruelty. I passed it through the gate bars. 4 clauses, I said. "Read them." Nathan took the document. His hands, I noticed, were rough in a way they hadn't been before, the hands of someone who had been doing unfamiliar physical work, lifting and carrying without the protection of hired help. I found I was glad to see it. It was the most honest thing about him. He read. Brittany read over his shoulder, her face cycling through resistance, calculation, and finally a kind of hollow exhaustion. "Clause 3, Nathan said, his voice low. "Temporary transfer of physical custody." He looked up. "You're taking our kids." "I'm protecting them from instability while you build something real," I said. "They'll be 10 minutes from you, in a school they already know, in a house they already love. You'll see them every weekend, every holiday, whenever we agree is in their interest." I paused. "What I will not do is let my grandchildren live in a rental car or on a friend's couch while their parents figure out what adults are supposed to do." Brittany made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a sob, something raw and unfinished. "Clause 4, Nathan said, still reading. "You won't press charges." "If you sign," I said, "I will not pursue the fraud charge on the lease guarantee, and I will not report the trust inquiry to the district attorney." I let that sentence settle. "If you don't sign, Gerald files both complaints at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." Nathan looked up at me, and for the first time in years, perhaps the first time since he was a boy standing on a step stool trying to steal cobbler filling, I saw my son's face without the performance on it, without the careful, cultivated surface of the man he had decided to be. Just Nathan, frightened and ashamed, and underneath all of it, somewhere still retrievable. "Mom," he said quietly, "I tried to access the trust account." "I know." I was panicking. We had no car. The lease was falling apart. "I know why you did it," I said. "It doesn't change what it was." His jaw tightened, then released. "You have a pen?" I took one from the portfolio and held it through the bars. He took it, signed, passed the document to Brittany, who stood for a long moment looking at the page, at her name on the signature line, at the life that had just narrowed down to this gate and these choices. She signed. I took the document back through the bars, folded it into the portfolio. "Gerald will call you tomorrow morning about the apartment," I said. 8 blocks north of here, 2 bedrooms, modest, clean. I paused. "Monday morning you look for work, both of you, not the work you want, the work that's available." Nathan nodded, just once. Brittany didn't speak, but she looked at me, fully looked at me, the way she never had in 9 years of being my daughter-in-law. And in her eyes I saw something I had never seen there before. Not gratitude, not yet, but the beginning of something that could grow into it, if she let it. "Your children are inside eating cobbler," I said. "You can see them in 1 hour, through the front door, supervised for as long as they need. Then they sleep here tonight." I looked at both of them. "Go get settled. Rest. Tomorrow everything begins." I turned and walked back up the porch steps. Behind me I heard Nathan say quietly, to no one in particular, or perhaps to Brittany, perhaps to himself. She knew. She knew the whole time. I went inside, closed the door. In the kitchen, Owen was telling Barbara a long and elaborate story about his new school's soccer team, and Lily was carefully arranging snickerdoodles in a circle on her plate with the focused seriousness of a child who has decided that some things, at least, can be made orderly. I set the portfolio on the counter, washed my hands, cut 2 slices of peach cobbler. "Harold," I thought, "your grandchildren are safe. The rest is just paperwork. 6 months is a strange unit of time. It is long enough to change a habit, short enough to remember who you were before, long enough for a proud man to learn humility, short enough that the humility still costs him something every day, long enough for a marriage to either break completely or begin, for the first time, to be real." I watched my son and his wife move through those 6 months the way I had once watched Nathan learn to walk, with the particular attention of someone who knows that falls are part of the process, and that the worst thing you can do is catch every one of them. The apartment I had rented was on Caldwell Street, 8 blocks north. 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms, windows that faced the brick wall of the building next door. No pool, no ocean view, no granite countertops or the particular hush of expensive construction. The kitchen was small, and the water pressure in the shower was inconsistent, and the radiator knocked through the night in a way that took some getting used to. Nathan hated it for exactly 3 weeks. I know because Barbara, who had appointed herself my intelligence service, reported that she had seen him standing outside the building on 2 separate Tuesday evenings smoking a cigarette, something he had given up 11 years ago, with the specific expression of a man having an ongoing argument with his own life choices. By the 4th week, the cigarettes stopped. Nathan had found a job. It was not the job he would have chosen. It was not the job of a man who had spent 3 years describing himself at dinner parties as an entrepreneur with interest in real estate development. It was an administrative coordinator position at Hollowell Freight and Logistics, a shipping company on the east side of Knoxville that moved industrial equipment across the Mid-South. The work involved spreadsheets, filing systems, coordinating between drivers and dispatchers, and answering a phone that rang more often than was reasonable. Nathan's supervisor, a compact and no-nonsense woman named Pat Sykes, told him on his first day that she had no patience for people who thought the job was beneath them and that he was welcome to demonstrate otherwise. He apparently decided to demonstrate otherwise. By the end of the 2nd month, he had reorganized the company's entire document archive, something no one had attempted in 6 years, and Pat Sykes had told him she would recommend him for permanent status after his probationary period concluded. He told me this on a Sunday, sitting at my kitchen table, and the way he said it, quietly, with the particular pride of someone who has earned something rather than inherited it, made me set down my coffee cup and look at him for a long moment. There you are, I thought. There is the boy I raised. Brittany's transformation was slower, and in some ways more interesting to witness. The woman who had told me at my own Thanksgiving table that I was clingy The woman who had signed my name to a fraudulent lease document and screamed at a court officer on a Scottsdale sidewalk did not become someone different overnight. That is not how people work, and I had lived long enough not to expect it. What she did was smaller, and I thought more real. She found freelance work through an online platform, design projects, mostly small businesses needing branding materials, nothing close to the regional director title she had carried for 3 years in Phoenix. The pay was a fraction of what she had earned before. She worked at the kitchen table of the Caldwell Street apartment in the mornings, after Nathan left for work, and before Owen and Lily came home from school in the afternoons. She sold their old furniture through a resale app, the pieces they had moved to Scottsdale, and then, in the chaos of the eviction, managed to store briefly in a local facility before retrieving. She put the money toward their electric bill. She learned the price of dish soap and laundry detergent and what it costs to feed a family of 4 for a week on a budget that requires actual thought. On the 15th of November, exactly 1 month after they had signed the document at my gate, she appeared at my door on a Saturday morning holding a glass baking dish covered with aluminum foil. "I made peach cobbler," she said without preamble or performance. She was looking at a point slightly to the left of my face, which I recognized as the look of someone making an effort that is costing them more than they want to show. "I found your recipe card. It was in the box of things I brought back from Knoxville." She paused. "The box I was going to throw away." I looked at the dish. At her hands holding it, which were less carefully manicured than they had always been, the nails cut short now, practical. "Come in," I said. She did. She put the cobbler in the refrigerator without being asked where it went. She stood in the kitchen for a moment, looking slightly uncertain, which was an expression I had never seen on her face before, and which I found I had more patience for than any of her certainty had ever earned. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said. "Dorothy," I said. "You can call me Dorothy, Brittany. You always could." She nodded, looked at her hands. "I also wanted to tell you—" She stopped, started again. The effort of it was visible, and I let it be visible, did not rush in to smooth it over the way I once would have. I started watching videos online about knitting, just out of curiosity. She glanced up. "It's harder than it looks. A lot harder." I was quiet for a moment. "Yes," I said. "It is." She nodded again, a small nod, private and self-directed, as though she were confirming something to herself rather than to me. "I'm sorry about the blanket," she said. "The one you made for Lily." I did not say it's all right, because it had not been all right. I did not say I forgive you, because forgiveness is not something you hand to someone like a receipt. It is something that grows slowly in the space that honesty creates, if both people tend it carefully. "Thank you for saying so," I said instead. "That matters." Brittany looked at me then, fully, directly, for only the second time in 9 years. The first had been through a gate with a document between us. This time there was nothing between us except the truth of what had happened and the tentative, fragile possibility of what might come next. "I'll let myself out," she said. "Sunday lunch is at noon," I said. "Sharp. Whoever helps set the table eats first." For just a moment, brief, cautious, like something new testing whether the light was safe, she almost smiled. The 15th of each month became what I privately called the accounting. Nathan and Brittany would arrive at Harold's study, together, which I required, because I had learned that financial conversations held separately allowed each person to construct a private narrative in which the other was more responsible, and they would open their household ledger. I had given them a physical ledger, not a phone app, not a spreadsheet, an actual bound notebook with columns for income, fixed expenses, variable expenses, and savings. The kind Harold had used when we were first married and learning together what it meant to build something. They filled it out by hand. Every dollar, every decision, every category. I reviewed it with the same attention I had brought to the company accounts for 30 years, and I did not soften my observations, but I also did not make them cruel. A budget review is not a punishment. It is a lesson in the relationship between choices and consequences, and that lesson, delivered honestly, is one of the most useful things one person can give another. The third month, Nathan had overspent on groceries by $40. "Walk me through this week," I said, finger on the line. "We ate out twice," he said, "Thursday and Saturday." "What happened Thursday?" "Long day. Pat had us working late on the quarterly dispatch audit. Brittany was on deadline. Nobody wanted to cook. What would it have cost to cook? He thought about it. Maybe $12. We spent $38 at the restaurant. $26 difference, I said. Multiplied over a month, if it happens twice a week, that's over $200. Over a year, that's your car insurance. I paused. I'm not saying never eat out. I'm saying know what it costs when you do. Nathan wrote something in the margin of the ledger. I watched him write it and thought of Harold, who had said something almost identical to me in the second year of our marriage, sitting at a kitchen table not so different from this one, going over numbers by lamplight because we couldn't afford to waste electricity. Where did the time go, I thought, between that kitchen table and this one? Mom, Nathan said without looking up from the ledger. Yes. I've been thinking about what to say to you for about 2 months. He set the pen down, looked up. I don't think I can say it right. I don't think there are words that are actually the right size for what I did. But I want you to know that I understand it now. What it was. Not just the legal part, but the other part. He stopped. I waited. You were trying to take care of us, he said. And I treated that like it was just something you did, like a function, not like a choice you were making every time. He picked up the pen again, turned it in his hand. The trust account thing. He shook his head. When I think about it now, I can't. He stopped again. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, but especially for that. I looked at my son, this man who was not the man he had been 6 months ago, who was becoming slowly and at considerable cost the man Harold had hoped he would be. I know you are, I said. That's why we're here. Owen and Lily moved through those 6 months with the remarkable adaptability of children, which is to say, they suffered less than the adults in the room hoped they might, and more than anyone liked to admit, and they processed it in ways that were entirely their own. Owen, who had Harold's steady eyes and Harold's particular talent for absorbing information without appearing to, grew quieter for a while, and then, one afternoon in November, asked me with great seriousness whether the fact that his parents had done something wrong meant they were bad people. I sat down at the kitchen table across from him. No, I said. It means they made bad choices. Those are different things. He thought about this. What's the difference? A bad person is what you are, I said. A bad choice is what you do. People can make terrible choices and still have the capacity to become better. That's what your parents are working on right now. He nodded slowly. Like when I lied about breaking the lamp and then felt so bad about it I told you anyway. Exactly like that, I said, except grown-up sized. He seemed satisfied with this. Lily, who was 7 and therefore conducted her emotional processing primarily through art, produced over those 6 months a remarkable series of crayon drawings which she left in various locations around my house. On the kitchen counter, the side table in Harold's study, once tucked beneath my coffee cup so I found it when I lifted it in the morning. The drawings featured, in her developing style, a house with yellow windows and a large garden, several small figures in various configurations, and, in a detail that moved me more than I could properly explain, a recurring figure with silver hair who appeared in every single drawing, always in the center, always slightly larger than the others. I kept every one of them in the box on the closet shelf, the same box where I had kept Nathan's kindergarten drawing for 40 years. It was on a Thursday evening in late March, the 6-month mark approaching, the Tennessee spring just beginning to negotiate with the last of the winter, that I found Harold's letter. I had been reorganizing the study, not because it needed reorganizing, but because I had reached the point in grief, the long, quiet 4th-year grief that is less like pain and more like weather, where I could finally do it without it feeling like erasure. I was going through the lower drawers of the oak desk, sorting papers into keep and file and let go, when I found it. In the back of the deepest drawer, behind a folder of old property documents, was an envelope. My name on the front, in Harold's handwriting. Blue ink, the good pen, the one he used for things that mattered. I sat down in his chair. I sat there for a long time before I opened it. Dot, if you're reading this without me beside you, then what I was afraid of has happened. And I don't mean my dying, because I've made my peace with that. I mean Nathan. I've watched him for the last few years the way you watch someone walk toward a cliff in a dream. You can see it, you know it's coming, and you can't quite make yourself believed when you try to call out. Brittany is not a bad woman. But she is a woman who found in our son someone she could shape. And Nathan, because he loves easily, the way you do, Dot, the way I always loved about both of you. Let himself be shaped. Every time I tried to talk to him, he had an answer ready that sounded like Brittany's answer. Every time I wanted to teach him something, he had already learned to avoid the lesson. I don't blame her entirely. I don't blame him entirely. I blame the years we spent making everything too easy, because we loved them and because making things easy felt like love. It wasn't, always. Sometimes love is the thing that doesn't move. I left the assets in your name because you are the most capable person I have ever known in my life, and I knew, Dot, that if it ever came to it, you would know when to hold and when to release. You always did. I was the one in the courtroom. You were the one who knew which cases we could actually win. Don't save him with money. You'll have to do something harder than that. Save him with the truth. It's the only thing that lasts. I love you. I have loved you since a Tuesday in October 1974, when you told me my closing argument had 3 logical errors and then proved it on a napkin. Take care of our garden, Harold. I sat in his chair for a long time after. The spring evening came through the window slowly, the way Tennessee evenings do, unhurried, settling over everything like something patient that has been waiting all winter. I folded the letter with the care you give to something irreplaceable, placed it in my wallet, in the slot behind Harold's photograph, where it would be close to him and close to me in the same small space. Then I sat quietly with the particular feeling of a woman who has been, across the distance of 4 years and the barrier of death, completely understood. You were right, I told him, in the silence of the study. You were right about everything. And I'm sorry it took me so long to hear you. The hydrangeas were beginning to bud outside the window. Early this year. Harold had always said that meant a warm spring. The first truly good Sunday arrived in April, not the careful, slightly tense Sundays of the early months, where everyone was on their best behavior in the self-conscious way of people who know they are being evaluated. Not the working Sundays of the middle months, the ones built around budget ledgers and household chores and the slow, unglamorous labor of people learning to be accountable. This was simply a Sunday. Noon, sharp. The doorbell rang once. I was in the kitchen finishing the cornbread when I heard it, and I set down the pan and went to the door. And when I opened it, Nathan was standing on the porch in a clean blue polo shirt and worn jeans, and he looked not happy exactly, not the performed happiness he had used to wear like a well-pressed shirt, but something more durable than that. He looked like himself. "Hi, Mom." He leaned forward and kissed my cheek. Not the automatic, slightly distracted kiss of the years before. A real one. The kind that has thought behind it. "Come in," I said. "You're exactly on time." "First time for everything," he said, and there was something in his voice that could almost have been the beginning of the ability to laugh at himself, which I considered one of the more promising developments of the entire 6 months. Brittany came up the porch steps behind him. She was carrying the glass baking dish. The peach cobbler had become her contribution to Sundays, and she had been making it every week since November, and each week it was slightly better than the last, which I thought was an excellent metaphor for everything else. "Dorothy," she said. "Brittany." I took the dish. "This smells right." "I used less sugar this time," she said, "the way your recipe card says. I'd been adding extra because I thought—" She stopped. "I was wrong about the extra." "Usually are," I said pleasantly. "Come in." Owen came in behind his parents and went immediately, and without being asked, to the cabinet where I kept the dishes, because over 6 months of Sunday lunches he had appointed himself the table setter with the quiet authority of a child who has decided this is his contribution and is taking it seriously. Lily came in last, holding a folded piece of paper, which she presented to me at the door with the gravity of a small person delivering an important document. I unfolded it. Another crayon drawing. The house with yellow windows, the garden, the figures. But this one was different from the others. This one had the family positioned differently. Not the silver-haired figure at the center with everyone arranged around her, but all the figures together, no one larger than the others, standing in what appeared to be the garden with small colored dots that I recognized, after a moment, as the hydrangeas. "That's all of us," Lily said. "In your garden." I looked at the drawing for a long moment. "It is," I said. "Will you help me put it on the refrigerator?" She took my hand and led me to the kitchen. We ate at 1 o'clock, all 6 of us, at the table Harold had built in 1992 from reclaimed oak, the table that had hosted 40 years of Thanksgivings and Christmases and ordinary Tuesdays, that had held the weight of arguments and celebrations and the long middle years of a family's life. Nathan poured sweet tea for everyone without being asked. Brittany had brought a salad in addition to the cobbler, something she had started doing in February, arriving with the designated dessert plus something extra, as though she were quietly building a habit of giving slightly more than was required. We talked about Owen's soccer team, which had won 2 games in a row under a coach named Mr. Aldridge, who Owen described as really strict but kind of actually good. We talked about Lily's school project on state birds, which she was approaching with a scholarly intensity that I found both familiar and deeply gratifying. Nathan told me about the logistics audit at Hollowell, how Pat Sykes had asked him to train the new hires on the document system he'd built. She said I have a talent for organizing chaos, he said, with a self-awareness that was new and genuine. Which is funny because I spent years creating it. People often discover their strengths through their failures, I said. Your father discovered he was a good lawyer after losing his first 3 cases. Nathan looked up. I didn't know that. He didn't talk about his failures. He probably should have. I paused. I found a letter he wrote me, before he passed. The table went quiet, not uncomfortably, but with the particular attention people give to something they understand matters. He knew things would be difficult, I said. He had seen it coming before I was willing to. He trusted me to handle it when the time came. I looked at Nathan. He was proud of you, even knowing what might happen. He was proud of who you could become. The word he used was could. Nathan set down his fork. I saw his jaw tighten the way it did when he was holding something, and I saw him decide not to hold it. And that decision, small as it was the most adult thing I had watched him do in years. I want to read it, he said. Someday, when you think it's right. I'll let you know when that is, I said. After lunch, Nathan and Brittany did the dishes together, an arrangement that had apparently become their Sunday habit, standing side by side at the sink, the way people do when they have stopped performing a marriage and started actually living one. I sat in the living room with the children, playing rummy at the coffee table. Owen had learned quickly and was already developing the particular focused patience that Harold had always said was the most important skill in cards, and in life. Through the kitchen doorway, I could hear the low sound of Nathan and Brittany talking, not the careful, slightly staged conversation of supervised Sundays, but the ordinary, continuous murmur of 2 people working alongside each other on something as unremarkable as the dinner dishes. I did not try to hear what they were saying. I didn't need to. Some things you know not from the words, but from the sound underneath them. At 3 o'clock, they gathered their things to leave. The children said their goodbyes with the easy, uncomplicated affection of children who know exactly where they stand. Owen with a hug that was brief and slightly self-conscious in the way of 9-year-old boys. Lily with the full-body, unguarded embrace of someone who has not yet learned to measure what she gives. Nathan and Brittany walked to the door. Brittany paused on the threshold. Same time next Sunday? She asked. It was the same question she asked every week, and every week I gave the same answer, and I had come to think that the question and the answer were not really about logistics. They were a small, weekly act of choosing. Same time, I said. She nodded, went down the porch steps. Nathan lingered. He stood for a moment in the doorway looking at the house behind me, the hallway, the photographs on the wall, the corner of Harold's study visible through the open door. Do you ever feel lonely here? He asked. Just you in the house? I considered the question honestly, the way he had asked it. Sometimes, I said. In the evenings, when it's very quiet. I miss your father most at dinner time for some reason. I paused. But lonely and alone are different things, Nathan. I am alone often. I am not lonely in the way I used to be afraid I would be. He nodded slowly. I'm going to be different, he said. Not a promise made to persuade me of something, not the kind of declaration that substitutes for action. Just a statement of intention, said quietly, to himself as much as to me. I know, I said. I can see that you are. He kissed my cheek, went down the steps. I watched him reach the sidewalk where Brittany was waiting with the children. Owen said something that made Nathan laugh. A real laugh, unguarded, the laugh of a man who is not performing for anyone. Brittany glanced back at me and gave a small nod, the kind that carries more meaning than most conversations. They walked to the car, the second-hand Toyota they had bought on an installment plan, which coughed slightly when Nathan started the engine and was, in its modest, reliable functionality, one of the most honest things they owned. The car turned at this corner and was gone. I went back inside. The kitchen was clean, cleaner, in fact, than I would have left it, because Brittany had wiped the counter and Nathan had folded the dish towels. Small, unnecessary acts of care that I noticed and did not comment on because some things are better received by being simply accepted. I made a cup of coffee, carried it to Harold's study, sat in his chair. The spring evening was coming in through the windows, golden and unhurried, and the hydrangeas along the back fence were pushing out their first tentative buds, the copper and rust of October replaced now by the pale promise of new growth, white and soft and not yet open. I reached into the cabinet beside the desk and took out the box of yarn. Navy blue, the same color as the scarf that had been thrown away. Not to replace what had been lost. The past cannot be replaced, only accepted and carried, but because the hands that had made something with love could make something again. I picked up the needles, started the first row. The knock and settle of the needles was the same as it had always been, the particular rhythm of a thing being built one careful stitch at a time, each one dependent on the one before it, each one creating the condition for the one that follows. Harold, I thought, we did it. Not the way I imagined. Not gently or without cost. But we did it. The family is still here. Smaller now, maybe, but truer. Less beautiful in the way of things that have never been tested. More beautiful in the way of things that have been broken and rejoined. I think that is the better kind. My name is Dorothy Hargrove. I am 69 years old. I have been a daughter, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a widow, and a woman who spent more years than I should have confusing generosity with love and self-erasure with virtue. I know the difference now. Love is not the absence of limits. Love that has no edges is not love. It is a mirror that tells people only what they want to see, and people who see only what they want to see eventually walk off cliffs. Real love is the thing that doesn't move. The thing that says, I will not pretend this is acceptable. I will not enable you to become someone less than you are capable of being. I will hold the standard even when holding it costs me something, because the cost of holding it is nothing compared to the cost of letting it go. Harold knew this. He had always known it. He put it in a letter and left it in a drawer and trusted me to find it when I was ready to hear it. I was 69 years old before I was ready. I think 69 is not too late. I think, in fact, it is exactly the right time, the time when you are old enough to have earned the clarity and young enough to use it, when the fear of being alone has finally been replaced by the understanding that integrity is its own company, and that a woman who knows who she is does not need anyone to confirm it for her. The needles moved in the quiet study. The hydrangeas budded in the spring garden. Somewhere 8 blocks north, my son was learning for the first time what it meant to be the man his father had hoped he would become. And I, the woman they had forgotten to tell, the woman they had written off as the soft, generous, easily managed periphery of their lives, was at the center of everything. I had always been. They had simply forgotten. Now they remembered, and I was knitting.